Yes, hello. Umefika?
Sasa niko chonjo. Thanks so much.
Haya.
Hello.
Hello.
Nimeshukuru sana.
Haya, sawa, acha
Thank you.
host. Ukue host sasa, sawa.
Niko host tayari. Ama siko host. Nifanya niwe.
Sawa.
Sasa thanks so much.
Haya.
Nimeshukuru sana. At least ni mapema hivi.
Exactly, hata you are on time. Ni vizuri mwalimu akue wa kwanza kuingia.
Bwana, ukikupata huku
I think we should encourage teachers, to be the first one to come like you. Right now they see the students as they come.
It is true.
Like kuna wengine wanaandika hata majina yao kama connecting. So ukiona connecting dot tunafikiria bado ina connect na kumbe student already ameingia class.
Lakini ni vizuri.
Okay, let me make you the host.
Sawa.
Haya, good day.
Nafanya admission. The other nini security measures utaweka?
Kama gani hiyo nini?
Na ile I'm now the host, kuwazuia wasiandike?
Yes, hata recording ishaanza kurecord.
Ndio, kuna kitu kingine tunafaa tuweke.
Kwa annotations, ukitaka kama utashare screen, utaki andike screen yako kwa annotations. Unasema disable from the participants.
I disable from the participants.
Okay. Umeona hapo? Yes. So ni wewe tu ndio utakuwa.
Imeandikwa kwa advanced sharing options ama?
No. Kuna kuna dots 3 hapo mbele. Other nini? Other settings.
Za nini? Unaongea za
unaona sharing. Hapo kwa sharing. Kwa share screen kuna participants, alafu ukiendelea hivi hebu soma hizo menu zingine.
Kuna breakout rooms, pause, stop recording. Breakout rooms.
Kuna annotations kwa hiyo nini kwanza, the main screen. Rudi hapo kwa share. Kwa share screen usiklik share screen. Kwa share screen there is a next thing na imeandikwa annotation.
Hii yangu haina, inaonyesha inaonyesha the share screen. And then kaaro kameangalia juu.
Unatumia nini, simu?
Hapana, laptop. Yako ama ni edition.
Ebu click hiyo arrow imeangalia juu.
Angalia juu inaniambia one participant at a time. Multiple participants can share, and then advanced sharing options.
Ebu enda hapo advanced sharing options.
Inasema how many participants can share at the same time? One participant. Alafu who can share? Only host can share.
Good, hivyo sasa.
Na kuandika, wanaweza andika?
Kuandika sasa kuna annotations. Kuna plenye imeandikwa annotations.
Kwa sharing
Kwa sharing hapo tu, kwa hiyo
annotations. Ama niangalie kwa niangalie kwa screen share.
Hapo screen share, hapo annotation settings.
Acha niangalie. Alafu nikuambie kabla nikuachilie. Naona annotate peke yake. Ama kwa 3 dots nimekupata.
Good.
Hapa kuna breakout rooms, pause recording, stop recording, disable participants annotation
unaona sasa naweza andika screen yako, unaona? So right now I can write like
disable.
Disable. Unaona sasa hii najaribu kuandika haiandikiki. So hapo sasa
it is true.
Hapo sasa ni poa. Disable.
Hapo kuna kitu kingine. Kuna allow participants show names of annotators. No, nimetoa yoyote.
Hata unaweza weka show names. Ukitaka kuona ule note unaweka sema show names If for example you don't disable, hakuna haja. Lakini ni vile tu ukitaka kureprimand maybe ujuange ni nani, unaweka show name. Sasa that akianza kuandika vitu hapo unajua ni fulani fulani, unaambia wewe mbona unafanya hivi. Lakini hakuna haja, just disable. And then maybe
I think that's
and then maybe mute participants on joining.
Mute participants, okay, sawa.
You don't keep on muting them, you just say mute participants when joining, so it mutes automatically.
Okay, sawa.
So right now you are
wacha ni admit sasa.
Continue.
Okay. Yes, good afternoon, students. I think we've given them enough time. They'll find us already moving on. Now, we have looked at one extract, which I'm going to look at in the course of the presentation. I still continue with my discussion on how to answer questions in paper 2. And so far, there are two extracts which I have lined up for us to discuss. Other than that, we shall also have a look at, if time does allow, we shall also look at oral poetry, an area that is also poses challenges to some students, not all, but there are students who do find oral poetry a challenge. And I will invite your questions maybe on our WhatsApp platforms, where we can discuss maybe some of these challenges that are normally there on an individual level, because it might not be that it is everybody who has that challenge. Now, we already posted, for those who came in earlier, where our extract is going to come from. And we are going to have with us our copies of Blossoms of the Savannah. Okay, and with this, I'll require that you be in a position to identify where our extract comes from. As I told you last time, the text should be read on a continuous basis, so that now we have it on our fingertips. We know the concepts, we know how the events are connected to each other. Now, maybe you have noted where our extract starts from and where it ends. Possibly this is where it ends. If you can pick it out from what I'm rolling down, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. Just give me a minute to sort out an issue here. We still have students coming in, a good number of them. So I have to take a bit of time also admitting them to the room. Right, so I was saying that there's an extract in front of us, and I hope we'll be in a good position to identify where it's coming from and possibly also see where it ends. It ends in this phrase, a dream, then there's an exclamation mark, a dream. But then it was just that, a dream. And you'll find that in the course of today's presentation, I'll also take a bit of time to talk about the dream. Why do we use dreams in works of art? Why would a novelist use the dream motif in his or her work? In our text, we have a number of dreams. So we are going to have a look at them and discuss why a writer would want to use dreams in their presentation. Now, if you might have noted, our excerpt 5 comes from page 194. And it begins with that line, however, the notion that he was about to hand over his own daughter, it is something that he is going through. One of the characters is going through. We're going to have to name him. And his conscience is disturbing him at the beginning of this extract. And there is a discussion there on why, we're going to have a very lively discussion possibly on why that situation, that Ole Kailo finds himself in that situation. There are going to be moral issues that we're going to Right. So we would want to have a look at some of the issues. So I'm going to give you, let me give you something like 3 minutes. It's now 2:19, 3 minutes or 4 minutes, let us say. So by 2:24, you can switch on your cameras, and you can raise your hand as an indicator that you have finished reading. So I'm giving you 4 minutes to go through this excerpt. By 2:23, we should be through. For those who have just joined us, we are reading Blossoms of the Savannah from page 194, where we begin with, however, the notion that he was about to hand over his own daughter, up to where we end with a dream, exclamation mark. And one of our focus questions here is, why does Ole Kulet use the dream motif in his work? What is the purpose of the dream motif in his work? Also, within it, there are a number of questions that I would want us to have a look at. I'll add 1 more minute to enable us to at least understand the text well. As said, once you're through, just raise your hand, just turn on your video, and then you raise your hand. Or do we? you need to turn to mute yourselves. Now the students mute yourselves, otherwise I might have no recourse other than to mute all of you. Kindly mute yourselves. Mute yourselves, please. As I was saying, I think we now move on to this excerpt. There are some I know who have already covered this excerpt to some extent, but not with the focus that I wanted us to have. So we are going to have a look at this excerpt briefly, but I have in mind only targeted areas, which I think are worth our discussion this afternoon. Now, we are going to look at, we want to have a look at the areas which, though maybe have never been tested, but are equally likely to be tested at the national examination. You've had a chance to go through this excerpt, was possibly you've seen one or two aspects which are worth discussing. Now, when we look at this excerpt, the first thing we note is that this excerpt is based on a particular issue that the characters are going through. The characters that are present in this excerpt, and even before and after, are going through a very, or have gone through a situation of conflict. Conflict at the parental level, and conflict even at the societal level. And conflict in real life suggests some kind of compromise that is expected of a person. And this compromise sometimes tends to, is against certain expectations that we have ourselves. So we notice that in this excerpt that we have, the characters have, one of the characters actually bears the burden of this conflict because he's expected to make a decision, which of course, as we know, has already been taken away from him because he has no power to make that decision. So the decision has already been made for him, and it leaves him in a state of unease. We know most human beings, or rather all of us, we do not anticipate situations of where our own personal freedoms are constrained. But we notice this particular character, he had no decision, he had no freedom to make the decision. It was actually taken away from him. So first of all, he feels constrained by the fact that Olesidori has already made that decision of having his daughter. And the second thing that we notice with this character is that he was denied the chance to voice his opinion. He was in a state of powerlessness, helplessness. And with this in mind, he now has to confront the inner person himself. Sometimes we call this inner person the conscience. And he wonders whether he has done the right thing. Psychologists most of the time will tell you that a human being, when faced when in a situation of conflict, will find most of the time he himself or herself having to rely on what referred to as defense mechanisms. one of our strongest defense mechanisms that seeks to protect us. Sorry for being a bit psychological here. But one of the defense mechanisms that seems to affect us, to help us out in situations of frustration, conflict, trouble, or stress, is denial. And of course, he has to live with that. He tries to suppress that particular situation that he is in. A second defense mechanism that we see Ole Kaelo using is what we refer to as rationalization. And we shall examine that. And we see him now trying to look for a way of reasoning that excuses his current behavior, his current state of unease, his current state of confusion. And he is in some kind of stress. And he talks of this, and we see this in the first paragraph, where he tries to rationalize. And we are saying he's using a defense mechanism called rationalization. And he tries to excuse his behavior. By this, he's trying to suppress that which he knows is wrong. And he says, after all, there are those who got their ill-gotten wealth through mega scandals. And in these mega scandals, they got away with it and nobody is asking them. And he mentions or cites two of these known, I call them known, mega scandals. And we have the mention in the first paragraph of Goldenberg, and then we also have Anglo-leasing. Now, one thing that I'm going to emphasize in the course of my presentation this afternoon is this, that anything mentioned in a work of art, and I'm talking about a work of art that is worth its salt, because there are some which are purely for entertainment or propaganda purposes. But when we're talking about serious literature, if there is a device, if there is an incident or an event in a text that is mentioned, and I want you to have this kind of frame of mind as you read this text over and over. Keep in mind this, that anything mentioned, anything happening in the text has a purpose. And so the mention of Anglo-leasing, the mention of Goldenberg, both of them serve a purpose. And that is our work as, I want to call you the literary critics at this juncture. It is our work now to criticize in a positive way and ask ourselves these questions. Why did Ole Kulet mention Anglo-leasing? Why did Ole Kulet mention Goldenberg? What is the significance, particularly in this excerpt that we are looking at? And I've already mentioned that the purpose basically is to show us, the purpose of this, of course, is to try to relate. Yes, he's trying to relate his text to the modern day realities. Yes, trying to show that his text, Blossoms of the Savannah, is a relevant text. Yes, but it could also be that he's trying to show us, he's also trying to show us that there is an inner conflict that is facing not only Ole Kaelo, but there's also the impact on the wider society. That Goldenberg is not just affecting these two characters, it is also affecting the wider society. Just as Ole Kaelo is conflicted, his conscience is disturbed. The same way, the national psyche of Kenya, the Kenyan national psyche is affected, especially by the perpetrators of these two crimes, mega crimes. They are affected by what they did. Remember also earlier on in the text, Ole Kaelo seems to admire what he calls the gospel of prosperity. He seeks to admire how easy it is, how the well-off seem to live. He admires the kind of life that Oloisidori and the others seem to live. And he really wants to really say, I want to live a life like that. And the writer, in what we refer to as an authorial intrusion, mentions that he had fallen for the gospel of instant riches. And he likens it to instant coffee, which many in the modern generation, particularly in our country, seem to want to have. Or the kind of life that they seem to have is that one of instant riches, irrespective of how those riches have been got. And of course, our role here as I want to call us literary pundits is to look at these texts and ask ourselves, yes, as much as all this is being discussed, there is the issue of the morality that must be examined. There is the issue of the morality that we must look at. Are we dealing with a moral issue here? The answer is yes. Are the characters doing the right thing? Some of them yes, some of them no. And we want to be more specific, especially in light of the fact that we are referring to this excerpt. So looking at this, the first question, as I just want to go over, looking at the first question, place the excerpt in its immediate context, 4 marks. Last time I explained that we need to be aware of the number of marks, 2 marks for before. Keep in mind that 2 marks after. Keep in mind that. Now, I told you last time also, many students do tend to ask, how far out do I go? How far after do I go in reference to the text? How far should I go? How far out should I go? And I told you and I answered you this way, that the best way of going about it is to ensure that you give the necessary details. You give the necessary details to that particular text. Now, with me, I have for you, at least you're fortunate you'll be able to see. Now here is the question, place the excerpt in its immediate context. Now, the kind of phrasing of your answer is what I should see this, or the examiner should see this before this excerpt. That phrasing is very important. Then there's the comma there. Olekailo had been taken around the palatial home that Oloisidori was building for Resian in Milimani. After the visit, Oloisidori has them driven back to Nasila. Olekailo, seated at the back of Oloisidori's car, appears disdainful of the untidy peasants. Olekailo is back to Nasila, and he sees how the life there is a stark contrast to the life of opulence that he has just been shown by Oloisidori. He starts regretting why he had moved to Nasila. Now notice, students, these are 5 points. Rather, they are 1, 2, 3, 4 points. And they are arranged in chronological order. We must be orderly. That's why I said the points must be at your fingertips. So you notice that you need to know the text well. So these are just some of the points. And there is no harm in presenting, these points. There is no harm in presenting these points, all of them. But notice that you'll only be given 2 marks for the points. It might look unfair, but I want to say this, I want to put it this way, that it is better safe than sorry. Give as many details as possible. You can see they are excess, but these are the points that we need to present to the examiner. Again, not as a show off, but to ensure that these 25 marks, we secure these 25 marks that are in this extract. And that's why I subtitled So we continue, and we've just seen how an illustration of what it means to be an ambitious person. Make sure that you present the details that we are looking for. Then we shall also see how the points are supposed to be given when we're talking about after. And I want to highlight again, we need to give the points, we need to give the points in chronological order. Then we also have another phrasing. Now remember, we assume now we have already secured the 2 marks. Then now we move to after. And so the phrasing again should be, and please note this, after this excerpt, and like I once saw some students from Kabarak High School doing, and I would wish we could also adopt that, where the students were able to direct the examiner. They were able to direct the examiner to where the answers were. Okay, it was a very neat, just a neat trick. And how did they do it? They simply did what I'm about to show you. They did not, of course, use red. That one is wrong. They simply underlined the key words there. And also here, you underline the key words. So the phrasing there directs, the examiner knows where to look for the points. That this student knows what he is doing. So he's able to identify before this excerpt, the marks for before this excerpt, and the marks for after this excerpt. So after this excerpt, again, using the same model we've seen before, be detailed, provide the necessary details. Okay. Ole Kailo and his wife ponder over the dream of Resian accepting Oloisidori's marriage proposal. Remember, there is that dream that Ole Kailo has. And of course, the husband and wife are pondering over that. Remember again, husband and wife did not sleep well. They were disturbed by that issue of the marriage proposal. But the focus in this particular excerpt was on the father. And remember, as I promised you, we want to look at why the dream was used, the dream motif. And possibly, in case a question comes your way, why would an author use the dream motif? Why would an author use the dream motif? You'll be in a good position to explain why the dream motif is used. Now, Ole Kailo ponder, okay, on the other hand, Resian and Tayo have hatched a plan to embarrass Oloisidori by returning to him all the gifts that he had given them. And so from here, we see there's an instance of dramatic irony, not a subject of discussion here, but something that is very key. And then they are finalizing, who is this? They are finalizing the plans. We know, of course, that they are finalizing the plans to ensure, just a minute, still busy admitting more and more of our students, because we don't want to have anybody out. Okay. On who should execute the plan and how they would do it. This is Resian and Tayo. Okay. Now, it's also good to mention some of the details of the plan that they have. The plan that they have. The visit by Oloisidori is made known to the girls by their parents, and it has been decided that Resian would be the one to receive the visitor and serve him coffee. The parents are surprised that Resian accepts their plans without a fight. You can see these are events immediately after this excerpt. And somebody would notice, if you are noticing, you'll see that we are not leaving out any important detail. All the important details are mentioned in this excerpt. Now, the next question that I thought is very key is, and I think should be worthy of our mention, is the question on style. But before I go on character, before I go to the question on character, maybe I'll invite maybe comments by students or questions at this juncture. I don't know if there are any questions. Are there any questions on what I've just talked about? Are there any questions? Any questions?
No, I don't have a question.
Thank you very much. So we'll now You'll allow me to mute everybody so that we can at least be in a good position to understand each other. Okay, then. So we'll now move on to the next question, and this is the question on character. Now, I would want to say that it is key, my dear students, it is key that when we read a question, we understand, and as we go well to, it will do you a lot of good to underline the key words. Number two, also look at the number of marks. If you look at what we have here, you'll notice that we have 4 marks. We are required to present points that will help us win these 4 marks. Now you notice that we are being asked to provide 2 character traits from this excerpt. So don't base yourself on any other part of this excerpt or from Okay, sorry about that technical hitch. I think we can continue. And we had reached a point where we were looking at the question on the character and whether really, how we can really score those 4 marks. Now, if you look at that question, which I want to display again, where we were looking at, we saw that the focus is on Ole Kaelo. And the 2 marks are going to be scored in this manner. For example, if our answer is that Ole Kaelo, and remember to write your answer using complete sentences, is conscientious. 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 Once again, using the Kabarak High School example, underline the keyword. There is no loss, there is no gain. It just helps to show that you are a student who is keen in what you're doing, or meticulous in the way you do or you carry out your work. So that so far you score nothing. This one we know at our level, we know there's no mark there. But we can enhance this answer further by talking about how the character is conscientious. We can say that he is disturbed by the thought of giving up his daughter in marriage to a scoundrel like Oloi Sudori. Something like that. So in our case here, we notice that this one is an explanation, but so far it is only 1 mark. I don't know whether this one is a surprise to you, but I would want to put it to you that this one does not score you the full 2 marks. Remember, our target are these 2 marks, two character traits, which are supposed to give us 4 marks. So for us at our level, we know the third part of this in ensuring that we score all the 4 marks there includes the part where we have to quote. Okay. And so we take a bit like this. Of course, you don't have the luxury of copy pasting as I do. You pick that, and then of course you have to write it. In your case, you will have to write it out. And of course, you simply place it there like that. And this is a full 2 marks. And as I said last time, the reason why we are doing this is to ensure that we don't leave anything to chance. We ensure that we score all the 4 marks. Now, I said last time also that we have what we refer to as the 3-part matrix. And you can see its manifestation here in brackets, identification. And then at this point here, we see the explanation. And remember last time I told you the reason why we do this. And then the last part is what we refer to as the quotation. The 3-part matrix: identification, explanation, quotation. Now, what is the reason for this? The rationale here is found by the fact that many times when we speak or write, we are not clear enough. So to leave vagueness out of the picture, we try as much as possible to explain ourselves here in this second part of the matrix. And then in case there was in case there was some gap in our explanation, it is backed up by the quotation. And maybe a word like conscience is what was required in the marking scheme. And so the student is able to score comfortably the 2 marks there. Now, you can also practice this. You can try this in your own time. How Ole Kaelo, you can say Ole Kaelo is materialistic. Try to show how Ole Kaelo is materialistic, using the three-part matrix. Now, the next question that I had lined up for us is not C. I'll make available this extract in case you had not gone through it to you for practice in your various WhatsApp groups. But question C, you can see that question C is a question that requires high level thinking. Look, even at the introduction of that question, the rubric is explain. So this is not time for giving sketchy answers. In my presentation later on, I will show how to work on your answers and the kind of answers that you should disregard. In fact, I say that you must invest in your answer. You must give a complete answer in your presentation. Make sure that you give a complete answer by investing details and emotion to it. Sketchiness will not get you where you're supposed to go. Now, I needed us to look at question F. And question F, there was an added question here. There was an added question here that we need not just talk about these three aspects of our grounding. We also needed to talk about use of the dream motif. Why do we use dreams in our writing? Dreams, we know, can also be very annoying. So why do we use dreams? Now, as I highlight these devices, I also want to say that it is high time that we as students focused on knowing these devices. Now, we had allusion, we had stream of consciousness, and also we had irony. These are deliberate. There was a deliberate use of these devices because I wanted to know whether my students know what these devices are. And for today's lesson, I use the dream motif. Why do we have dreams in our works of art? Before I go to the answers, I would also want to pause slightly here and talk about how to explain your answers when it comes to the vocabulary questions. Like now we had the first one, no, GNAW, no, pondering, impending visit. Now, I would want many students tend to give synonyms, one-word answers. But I would only vouch for you to use the synonyms approach if you are sure about that word. Number two, safeguard. And please avoid these pitfalls. The second safeguard you need to have in place is that make sure that when you're explaining, you keep to the tense of the word that is in front of you. Like now, no. If something is knowing, like now the way it has been used in the first paragraph, the first sentence. However, the notion that he was about to hand over his own daughter to a gangster continued to know at the conscience of Ole Kaelo, relentlessly. So within that sentence, it is assumed that there is a clue that you're supposed to get to help you answer that question. So to know, if you are very sure, is a word torment. Okay, so it was tormenting him. That thought or that notion was tormenting him. It was gnawing at him. It was eating into him. It was causing what we can refer to as lingering anxiety. That could be one explanation. But you notice I have not changed the word form. This is one approach, the synonym approach. But there's even a better one where you can explain the word as you see it being used. There's somebody who has a raised hand, and let me see how to get him to answer, to participate. Who is this?
Excuse me, Chair. I was asking whether, what if in the question the tense is present tense, but in the text it's past tense? How should you approach the answer, the question?
If it is in the different tense.
Yes.
Is the word in a different tense? The word no, G-N-A-W.
No, just asking.
Just asking. It is important that, okay, I don't think that mistake can be made, but it is important to notice that the word no is used actually it is used as a to infinitive. To infinitive. Continued to know. Continued to know. So it is already in the base form. It's already in the base form. So that one we can say we have no problem as such in this case. But in case, I don't think it can happen. Highly unlikely for it to happen that a word is in a different form from the way it is tested in the question paper. It is good in case of an issue, please just alert me so that I can pause. Okay, continuing. We continue with, so I've said there are two approaches you can explain. You can also use the synonym approach. But a third method is where you can combine the two. A word of caution here, please do not give two synonyms. In case it happens that they contradict, you will not score a point there. Now, let us go to the question that I had thought that was very, very key. Dreams are very key. Dreams are very important. They help us to be sane. We gain our sanity from sleeping and dreaming. They are very important. So an author may decide to choose to use a dream in their novel. And please note the following points as I have outlined them in the notes that are in front of you. They can reveal repressed desires. Dreams can reveal repressed desires. Now, desires are the yearnings that a human being has. Are the desires, are the yearnings. The desires are the yearnings. So to repress is to try to hold them back, to hide them, because maybe they might not be pleasant. They might not be very good. It might be that Okay, sorry about that. And thank you for the messages that at some point I could not be got. We'll try to work on that. We're almost coming to the end of our presentation. And I have this one here. Right, so we want to continue, and we want to talk about this excerpt, that is excerpt 6. Excerpt 6, which I presented to you, and I've said a few of you are able to give me your answers. Now, we've had a chance to read, and if you look at question 1, of course, basically that one is a question on plot that requires you to have good knowledge of what happens immediately before. It's also another method of testing you on what happens before. The other one is this one here. This is a question that requires you to talk about what happens, some events that had happened before, which influenced Ole Kaelo to initiate his daughters and how. And here you need to mention in clear details the role of Ole Sudori, Ole Musanka, and Ole Supeo. And for Ole Musanka, you need to go to page 51 of our text. Ole Supeo from page 22. We meet him very early in the text, and he has some words to say in as far as the text, the issue of female circumcision is concerned. Now, for this question C, the answer is found on page 66, of our text. And we are being asked to talk about the reaction of the two girls, in the text. Now, conflict is again, internal conflict is again explored in question F, where we are told between the two, between her love for her daughters and dutiful role of a faithful and obedient wife. Other examples which came up. Okay. Now that one is that is still water under the bridge, because I'll still have to provide the details for you. But I want to talk about how to answer questions in paper 2. That was something that I would want to end on. That is a note at which I would want to end at. And we notice in this one is an answer I was able to pick from a student, and give examples of other times when Mama Milanoi's duty as a wife superseded her love for her daughters. Okay. Now we notice that this student, this one, I just picked an answer just for purposes of illustration, not to make anybody uncomfortable. And it is a question for 3 marks. You notice the kind of answering that is given there is not clear enough. It is not clear enough what the student was saying, because the student says when Ole Kaelo, her and Ole Isidori planned for Resian's abduction, when Tayo was forcefully circumcised to be Ole Isidori's wife. What we are looking for here is not mere mentions. We are looking for details. We are looking for clear details from the text. Okay, so it is important that when we are answering such a question, we present the clear details. For example, when Resian had been betrothed to Ole Isidori, an old man was to become her son-in-law, which is culturally wrong. And this one we find on page 114. Okay, and so Mama Milanoi has no choice but to accept such a situation, which she knows culturally is not acceptable. On page 192, okay, I'm not saying that in the examination you quote the pages, but it is important for you to know the details and give the breadth of the details. That is why I noted here that the student is not giving details and is non-committal. Here is another student who was able to invest in this. It might not be clear enough on your screen, but I want to point out two questions. Okay, I want to focus on question B. 2B. Identify two people who have influenced Ole Kaelo to initiate his daughters and how. The answer that I want to read for you, the answer. Oluisidori influenced Ole Kaelo to initiate his daughters by blackmailing him into marrying off Resihan to Oluisidori. And Oluisidori had said that he would not marry Anaintoye Nemangalane. Ole Musanka, of the same, at the homecoming ceremony, condemns the alienated culture of having Ntoye Nemangalane amongst the community, and thus spurred the need in Ole Kaelo to circumcise his daughters. So this is a student who has taken time to invest emotionally as well as factually in presenting the details that are there. So there's need for full investment in the way we write our answers. So then another question here, please. This was a correct answer, but the student, this was question H, which had asked us to describe the attitude of the Nasilan people towards Emakerere. They have a contemptuous and hateful attitude. So don't start your answer with a pronoun. Show who it is that you're talking about. Start, of course, with the noun. Even if it has been mentioned in the question, it is important for you to write the noun first. Number two, in questions such as this, it is important to use the three-part matrix. Identify the adjective, explain it, and then provide the quotation that you need. Some of the students who presented their work, they can identify some of the answers there. So I'd intended us to talk about oral poetry, but our time is not with us, and I would want to maybe leave this space for those who might be having questions to ask their questions, in case there are any questions. Anybody? Justin Joroge, you need to mute yourself. Mashindi? Anybody with a question? Right, some of these materials I'll provide to you. I'll provide to you at in your various platforms. Otherwise, it has been a pleasure talking to you about blossoms of the savannah. Thank you.